Hi, good morning, everyone. It's great to have you with us today. Thank you so much for registering. We really do hope that you'll find this webinar interesting and useful as well back at your local association. I want to start with just introducing the panel today, and let's start with you, Meg.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Meg Mitchell, and I am the Council Engagement Coordinator. I've been in this position with CLO for almost 6 years. Before that, I was at Brampton-Caledon Community Living as a resource teacher and a service coordinator. I am broadcasting from Guelph, Ontario, and I'm excited for today. Be good.
Thanks, Meg.
Yeah.
Nico? Thanks, Meg. Thanks. Nico, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nico Pupella. I'm the CLO's Self-Advocate Council President. I reside up in the North Durham region in Bucksbridge. I've been part of the council for, I want to say, close to 8 or 9 years off and on. My last position I held was treasurer with the committee, or the group. I'm very active in my community with various other committees, as well as our rights committees, so I'm very passionate about that. I'm glad that we've got a large number of people joining us, and I hope you take something away from this that you can share with others and improve on the self-advocacy of others. Keith, over to you.
Thanks, Nico. We also have somebody that's off screen helping us with our technology today, assisting us, and her name is Marwa Osman. And Marwa, could you just introduce yourself and perhaps could you address, I know that we'll be taking questions later on in the session, but if you could address how that's to be done.
Sure, thanks, Keith. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So I'll be behind the scenes and just making sure that everything's working in the back end. If you'd like to submit your questions throughout the presentation, you're welcome to do that. In your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a section in the header that's labeled questions. If you want to just open that up, it should drop down and you'll be able to type in your questions and send them throughout the presentation, and we'll have a Q&A period at the end.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you, Marwa. And finally, I'm Keith D. I've been in the field for close to 40 years now. Started out in working in day supports and one-to-one supports and group homes, the standard stuff 40 years ago. Moved into being an APSW, an adult protective service worker in Toronto. Then I moved out to Brampton, where I worked with Meg at Brampton-Caledon Community Living for 15 years. And finally, I ended up my career in at Community Living Ontario, which I retired a year ago, but I'm working very casually, a few hours a week, supporting Nico and Meg and the Community Living Ontario Council, which I really love doing.
And we appreciate you being part of it, Keith.
Thank you. Thank you, Nico. Thank you. So as Marwa said, we'll be taking questions later in the presentation. But before we start this session, I wanted to remind folks that we have a second seminar. Now, this session is focusing in on the support an organization provides a self-advocacy group to be effective, to be engaged at their organization. But the second session that we're having is going to be a little bit more in plain language. It will involve more people from our council, and it'll be a dialogue that we have with everyone on the call. And I forgot to ask what, I know it's after New Year's, but does anyone have the specific date?
It's on the 12th of January.
January the 12th, we'll be having that seminar. So everyone's welcome to attend that, just as everyone's welcome to attend this session. Just a different audience, that's all. So if we
And,
can,
and a little better format. So for those that have a hard time understanding anything we might say today, we will
yeah,
break it down better in a more plain, simpler way in January.
perfect. Thank you, Nico.
And we encourage you to share that webinar with anyone that you know that would be able to take something away from it.
That's right. And I know we'll have the flyer out, registration out for that shortly. So if we could flip the page, Marwa. Okay. So our topic for the day is self-advocacy, learning and growing together. And our discussion today will be about strengthening self-advocacy within your organization and exploring the support required to develop effective and engaged self-advocacy participation. Now, the key words there are engaged self-advocacy. So that we're going to be going back to that concept quite a lot throughout this presentation, stressing that the whole idea of self-advocacy is when you're out there and you're making your case to the world, as opposed to be self-contained and speaking amongst yourself, and how your organization can help you do that. Oh, and then I just wanted, if we go back there for a second, I just wanted to point Nico out there. That's exactly what we're talking about. He's, I think by that picture, these are the old days when we used to get together as groups. But this is Nico front and center at the microphone at our AGM. I don't know what you were making there, Nico, but
I honestly don't remember, but that had to have been at least a few years ago. And I think we were in Niagara for that, or Sheridan in Richmond Hill.
Okay, so I thought that picture, Meg put this together for us, and when I saw that, I went, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm trying to talk about. So now you can go there, Marwa.
Poor Marwa.
Mm-hmm. Why is today's discussion so important? Well, we think we have something important to share. We've been building our capacity. I always say we, by the way, when I talk about council, and I always struggle with that. But at the end of the day, I keep on referring to us as we. And I know I'm not on the council. Meg's not on the council. Nico is on the council. But I think we've built a culture of our organization and the council to be a real collaborative. So I do slip into that we a lot, and as far as I'm concerned, it's so much better than referring to people as they. So as I was saying, we have something important to share. We've been building our capacity, especially over the last 6 or 7 years, but council's been around for close to 25 years. I know we celebrated our 20th anniversary. I think that was the one in the conference in Niagara Falls. So we've been active for a long time, and we feel we have something to be able to share. I know we work at the provincial level, but I think it all applies at the local level, local association as well. CLO has received several inquiries from our member organizations asking how to increase the role and effectiveness of self-advocacy. And Meg, I think we've had 4 or 5 calls in the last half year from organizations. So it came to this, so the idea came to us that perhaps we could do a webinar, and that people would be interested. And as you know, I think we have over 40 people on the call today. So we're really happy to see that. CLO has made a strategic effort in building our capacity and supporting self-advocacy within council, on our board, and throughout organization. And I'm going to talk a lot, we're all going to talk a lot about that today in terms of how you embed self-advocacy, not just within the group, but within your whole organization. And finally, CLO is also working closely with local associations who have been strong in supporting self-advocacy at their local association. And we wanted to make sure that we identified that. There's specifically a few organizations that have been incredible and that they offer us assistance when needed. And frankly, I think, especially speaking for myself, I've learned a tremendous amount from agencies like one Nico comes from, Community Living Durham North, Community Living London, Community Living Walkerton. These are incredible organizations that stand up proud with their local self-advocacy groups. And as I said, I think we've learned a ton from them. So we try to support each other as strong, independent bodies.
And not only that, but we also listen to our partners, our neighboring organizations. Like we encourage the feedback, and that's kind of how we build our self-advocacy as well.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. So the next page, please. So our main message for today: for self-advocacy efforts within your organization to be successful and impactful, a full commitment is needed from everyone in the organization. This means your CEO or executive director, participation of your board members, the staff, volunteers, everyone. Self-advocacy needs to be an integral part of your organization. So at this point, I'm going to pass this over to Nico. Nico, at the first part of this presentation, Nico's going to give an overview of the, I guess the structure of self-advocacy within Community Living Ontario. I'm going to go from there and talk about some of the concepts that we've been dealing with in regards to growing council and growing council's influence. Meg, after that, is going to talk about just the type of support, and we're going to stress this during the conversation today as well, the support that's required from an organization to support their self-advocacy body. And then we're going to open it up to some questions after that. So without further ado, Nico.
Thank you very much, Keith. So yes, so to touch on the structure of how ours is set up is it's based on three factors. Board representation. So at present, we have 3 people that are on our board of directors who identify as self-advocates. We have Michael Jacques, who is our vice president on the board. We have Yvonne Spicer, who is our council appointee to the board. And we also have David Hill, who is a director at large, who is also identified as a self-advocate. So our bylaws state that we have to have at least one self-advocate to be voted in by our members at our AGM. And we've also exceeded the number of people required to be on our board. So those 3 people are a very integral part of our organization because they help provide a voice to the board. Next slide, please. We also have council representation. So CLO supports an elected self-advocacy council. That means that we have elections and we have people that want to run to be part of the council. We have 2 components to the council. There's our council as a whole, and then we have our executive function as well. The council is a group of self-advocates that are recognized in the Constitution of CLO, who speak on behalf of other advocates, self-advocates, and we address a lot of key issues that are going on, and I will touch on that later on, and so will Keith, because we are very passionate about making sure that voices are heard and issues are getting resolved, and if they're not getting resolved, we try to take steps on how they can be resolved. We have a total of 12 members representing across the province, north, south, east, and west. And we also work with the board of directors, and we share information with them just like they will with us, as well as other member associations and affiliates. I forgot there was 4. Committee involvement. We have a large variety of different committees that are on part of the board, and we have a bunch of our self-advocates that are part of that, and I'm going to touch on a couple of them, ranging from board development, like the governance and structure of it, board engagement, and we have our finance committee, which I sit on. We have our nominations committee, which works in part with the AGM. And one that isn't really highlighted, but is a very key component, is our conference planning committee, because without them, we wouldn't have our annual conference meeting events year after year. So honestly, for me, it's great being part of that, as I played a huge part of that this past one that we did virtually, first time in history of the organization. Isn't that right, Meg?
I think so.
Yeah, so I played a key role because I was active within the planning committee, and I also worked on the tech back end like Mara was doing for us. So it's very important having our self-advocates involved in these different committees, because then they can at least provide a voice and opinion if needed. But it's great having that interaction with the board. And then we also have our advocacy involvement, which again plays a key role in the advocacy efforts. Like we have representation that includes meeting with government officials, presenting at the legislature, various events that we help out through the year. Again, part of the conference and AGM, and also writing letters of concern and support. That one is a huge component because if issues come up, we want to make sure that like we're getting our voice out there to say, hey, we may not agree with it, but let's see if we can come up with a strategy that will work better. And we're also being asked to be part of the consultation process with CLO in creating advocacy positions and awareness on issues. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Keith.
All right, thanks, Nico. So we're going to change topics now. Talk about the strategies Community Living Ontario has adapted in supporting self-advocacy. So Council has been a strong advocacy body within Community Living Ontario for more than 20 years, as I was saying earlier. But like any successful relationship, there is always room to improve and grow. And when I say we were a strong advocacy body, I think that's true to say for the 20 plus years that Council has been involved. I first noticed Council as an outside observer when I worked in Brampton, and was very impressed by them. I think it's always true. It's true to say that Council has been really, really lucky because we are able to attract strong representation from all over the province. I always like to think, you know, if you're really good at the local level, you want to, or you're interested in participating on provincially. So we do get those folks. So they are true advocates. So again, it was very strong. But we're going to say about 6 or 7 years ago, 6 years ago, I think, CLO support staff met with Council. This is when Meg and I started. I'd been already with Community Living Ontario for 4 or 5 years before I was asked to support the Council. But the first thing I did was hire Meg. 6 years ago, the CLO support staff met with Council to find out what they thought worked well and what they would like to change. Council said that they wanted to be more active, have a more active role, and in response, we made some changes. So this didn't happen in a vacuum. About 6 or 7 years ago, there was also a lot of stuff going on at Community Living Ontario. We had Community Living Ontario just gone through an internal and an external review that really focused in on a need to rethink our supports to our members, our member organizations, to families, to people out there being supported. So self-advocacy was a big part of that. You know, we also had a new executive director at the time, Chris Beasley. So many of the changes we implemented since then, I think, have proven to be effective. But at that point, we were sort of in an assessment stage of where we wanted to go. So our assessment at that time where people were a little bit on council, a little bit stuck. Great conversations, great advocates, but the discussions they were having were kind of on their own. Council would report to the board, but it would be kind of brief. It would be the board, or the council president that would kind of come in towards the end of the meeting, give a report. Wasn't that really engaged? There'd been a long history of council meeting on the same day because of we're a large organization provincially, geographically. Our board would meet every 3 months, so we'd all travel in to the Toronto area. And there was a tradition that council would do the same thing. Every 3 or 4 months, they would all come in together and meet at the same time. So there was sort of an engagement. We wasn't really involved in the meetings together, but there was a social prior and a social after. So people got to know each other. But 6 or 7 years ago, for some reason, that had gone off track a little bit, and people were meeting at separate times. So there was, you know, a lack. Again, I don't want to be too critical because they were still doing great work, the council, but we needed to pick up the pace a little bit and the engagement factor. So that's where we were 6 or 7 years ago. So let's go to the next slide. So many of the changes we implemented have proven to be effective. Community Living Ontario made a determined effort to include council in a greater part of Community Living Ontario. This included a bigger presence on our Community Living Ontario Board of Directors, a greater part in our advocacy initiatives, and a greater role in Community Living Ontario's relationship with our member organization. Now, this section I'm going to take a bit of time with. The advocacy piece, I'm going to move that a little further on in the conversation, but right now I'd just like to talk about the focus on the internal changes and the external changes, and I'll explain what that means in a second, that we made together. And when I say we, I'm talking about myself and Meg and Chris Beasley in our discussions with council. So a lot of this had to do with some first observations that we had of council and my experience with them, but also sitting down and meeting with people and really figuring it out what council wanted. You know, really council did want to be far more engaged than they were. And I think our board and our staff wanted to see the same thing. There was an effort, this was a decision Chris had made at the time, to make sure that we had a structure in place that talked about that had a direct support person such as Meg working with the council, who reported to a senior manager like myself, who had ongoing conversations with Chris, and then also with our board president. So we specifically implemented that kind of structure to increase the communication. It replaced a situation where they did have support. They had a support person who was actually doing a really good job. It was kind of the rest of it that wasn't working. It was sort of the structure of the organization didn't lead to a real flow of ideas. You know, I'm just trying to think of an example of that happening. I can't remember there was a response to a government initiative, and this was again 6 or 7 years ago. The government was asking for feedback on something, and I don't remember what it was, but I remember our policy department at Community Living Ontario, led by Gord Kyle, had come up with a policy or a response to the government's question, and we posted it online in their spot. And when we did that, we also saw a a posting by council, which was actually really good too. Like I think both were great, but we were unaware that two sides of the organization were working on it. And that was a sort of a typical example, maybe not so typical, but it's something that really made us pay attention, kind of like, how can this happen where we can have two bits of feedback to the government without realizing. So thankfully, as I said, both were great. Both didn't really contradict each other, but it's something we should have been better aware of, and potentially something that could have really gone wrong. All right. Secondly, so this is still within the same number one topic. That was one of the internal changes that we made, is the change of the staff and the reporting. Secondly, I already kind of talked about this, but was reconnecting with our board and council. You remember I said we started meeting at different times, and we wanted to fix that. The council wanted to fix that. The board wanted to fix that. Also, a hell of a lot easier to organize when we're all going to the same place at the same time, etc. All talking from the same page. So we fixed that. We started slowly with it. We started doing, there was always a social event after the board meeting and after the council meeting, and we'd kind of get together there so we get to know each other better. Then we started to have supper beforehand. So the whole week, it was like a weekend. It'd be like Friday afternoon we'd get there, and we wouldn't be home until, you know, Saturday night. So we were building all these social things, and we'd always through that time have the council president give a report to the board, which was like 5 or 10 minutes. Then, and I don't know who came up with the idea, whether it was the board or the council, but we started thinking, why don't we meet at some point during the weekend? Why don't we sit down together for an hour or so and discuss? Right? It started out kind of as council giving a report and talking about important things that they thought were something that we needed to be talked about. But then it kind of got more into a dialogue. At first, it was sort of a reporting, and then it was a dialogue. I remember some important stuff that we talked about, and I think it was pretty evident that the board was quite impressed with the council's knowledge on certain topics and insights that they were able to provide. So it was a really successful time. So we do that for an hour, and then we go off into our different, like the council meeting and then the board meeting in a different room kind of thing. Just before the pandemic, we were actually thinking of stepping that up a bit. Rather than the council giving a report to the board, we were thinking, why doesn't the board come into the council room and the board can give a report on some of the activities and some of the things that they're focused on. So just sort of turning that around. So it was a mutual respect, I think, that we were building. Thirdly, in terms of some of the internal stuff that we did to make the council stronger, you heard Nico a minute ago talking about the board structure. Well, one of those things was a bylaw change. So we formalized it through our constitution, through approval of our members, that the council would be empowered to select somebody either on the council, or they didn't need to be on the council, but someone identified with an intellectual disability who would represent council's interest on the board of directors. So we already had the one person identified, as Nico was saying, through our membership. This would be a second person. And as Nico said, we actually have a third person right now. So we're very healthy in terms of our the number of people that are on our board right now. But this sort of formalized the tie. It wasn't an informal thing. It formalized that tie between our council and our board, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it was a stepping stone for council. It means it's a connection. We saw council and the board as two separate, distinct groups, each with their own responsibilities and influence within the organization. This was simply a way of tying it together. You know, this person that was representing council was primarily a board member, not a council member on the board, but a board member. Theoretically, this person on the board selected by council didn't have to report to council. the way it works out is that they actually communicate quite a bit, and we try to get the person to sit on the council as much as possible. But at present, that person is not a council member, but she's a board member. That's where her responsibilities lie. It's just a great way to connect the two organizations. So I highly recommend, I think we highly recommend that close association with your self-advocacy body and your board. So that's the internal things. I'm still stuck on this number one. That's the internal stuff that we can do as an organization, or have done as an organization. Let me talk about some of the external things. And we're a membership-driven organization. And I think locally, you would compare that. It'd be comparable to the people that you support in the community, the families, the the members that attend your AGM. Those are the kind of the equivalent of our membership. The over 100 organizations out there that Community Living Ontario have as our members, and plus all the other members that are out there, individual friends of Community Living Ontario. So here are some of the things that we did to, yep, I'm still on, sorry, I'm still on page one. Here's some of the things we did to make the council have a bigger presence within our membership. First, we increased the presence of council at our conference and an AGM. And we gave people a key role at the mic. We decided that, people were not being necessarily seen, introducing a speaker or giving a report at the AGM, or volunteering in the hallway, telling people which way to go, that type of thing. We really,
or when you're dealing with the various sessions, having interaction with the person that's introducing.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's right. We also shared the council's annual report. We used to just give that to the board. We made a decision that, the president of the board gives a report to our membership. We thought the council could do the same, and has over the years, the last 5 or 6 years. We also increased council's profile in our Update Friday newsletter. We began to better connect with our member organizations with strong self-advocacy initiatives. Like what I mentioned before, Community Living London, Walkerton, North Durham, but there are other organizations as well that we really received a lot of support from. For instance, support workers would come down with members on their account. Some of our members on the council would actually not only help them get to the meeting, but participated in our meeting as well, and added quite a bit of value. We also did outreach too, in terms of, we started going to things like People First Conference, the Speaking Out Conference that we would attend. We also did a really interesting thing a few years back. There was a bit of history between council and People First. And one of the things council decided to do is we wanted to work more closely with People First, and I think we've done that. And if anybody's from People First today, they can either agree with that or disagree, but I think they'll agree that things have improved quite a bit. We've done some collaborative work with them. We asked the president of People First Ontario to speak at our conference, be a keynote speaker, and he did an incredible job. And it did so much in terms of making sure that it gave us a sign that the self-advocacy groups throughout Ontario are all on the same page. So I would again, one of the recommendations from a local level, I would certainly recommend that you up the profile of self-advocacy within your organization. So I'm finally at number 2, right? I promise I won't be going on as long. There's 6 of these. I won't be going on as long. If I was to reorganize this, I'd break number 1 up a bit more. So anyways, number 2, Community Living Ontario support staff met with council at length to determine what advocacy issues was most important to them. Council determined it was poverty and the devastating impact it had on people. We then decided collectively to make council's most crucial advocacy issue poverty, the one that needs to be addressed. So, you know, again, when Meg and I started 6 or 7 years ago, we recognized that council had a whole bunch of issues that they thought were really important and necessary to advocate. But at the same time, you know, we found that they were sort of talking amongst themselves without a plan of action in terms of making sure that their message got out. So it wasn't the passion that we had to worry about, it was more the message. So, you know, it wasn't only the issue of poverty, it was also the issue of ODSP. And it's incredible. Remember, I was talking a minute ago how the board was so impressed with council's knowledge on things. It's hard not to be entirely impressed with the council's knowledge about how ODSP works. You know, I would hate to be a person representing ODSP coming to a meeting of council and talking with them directly, because the person would be like, well, they'd be treated very politely, but they'd be getting really intelligent, intense questions in regards to how ODSP works. We were sitting on this this resource, this advocacy resource that we were not properly using. You know, this is a good example too of how a self-advocacy group within your organization can actually influence how you provide supports. So Community Living Ontario doesn't necessarily provide supports, although we do a little bit through some of the things we do, but we're an advocacy body. Our advocacy position at that time was not to spend too much time talking about ODSP and the fact that it doesn't cover sort of the cost of living and that people who are living in poverty. Community Living Ontario's position at that time was more related to making sure people have the capacity and the resources and supports they need to get out there, get a job, be part of the community, and not to be necessarily reliant on government pensions. So there was a conflict, right? We don't want to push for better ODSP because we want people focused out there getting a job, and we want our advocacy focused on getting people out of poverty. The problem though was, and we could see it right in front of our eyes, there were people on council living in poverty, right? People were suffering. The people that were coming to our meetings were those folks that were the victims of lack of government response. So I think what happened when we started saying this is a big thing at the board, in discussions that we had with the public, Community Living Ontario started to listen. Again, there was a change of leadership and way we're doing things, but I also like to think it was the council that said that's not acceptable. We can argue for all those other things in terms of the supports that people need to get a job and be successful and live independently and all those things. But here we are living in poverty. And as a direct result of the fact that ODSP is not enough, right? So I don't think it was a big, huge argument. I don't remember it as a big, huge argument. I remember Community Living Ontario people like myself and others just kind of going, yeah, how could we not? We can argue both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, I guess, right? You can do both, and you can make the argument make sense. That you could ask for all those things, but at the same time, you can say that people that are not benefiting from our community and our economy need the basic supports, and that was council's position, and I think it was great, and because Community Living Ontario accepted that argument, it empowered the council. It made them feel better. It made them feel that they were going to be listened to. You know, every year we go to the Ontario does a consult with its members prior to the budget, and we put in our budget suggestions. This is like in November prior to the after New Year's budget going out. And for the first time during that process, Community Living Ontario talked about a need for ODSP to go up. Right? It really did. I mean, that was an impact. I remember myself personally, I think there's a provincial network, and I won't get into what the provincial network is, but it's a group of organizations that get together once a month in Toronto representing a bunch of provincial organizations, Community Living Ontario being one of them. And I remember us talking about ODSP and the need for it to go up. And we were kind of checking off what needed to happen and what didn't. Nobody around the table didn't think that ODSP shouldn't go up, but we had a number of other things to talk about as well, like stabilization of the sector, etc. So maybe we shouldn't push as hard for ODSP. That's kind of the conversation. Don't quote me, but I remember thinking at the time, I can't go back, or we can't go back to our council and say, we decided not to push that. We decided not to push for the increase in ODSP. You know, another thing I think the network did, and I don't know if Community Living Ontario did it in the past, but we would thank the government for 1% increase or a 0.5% increase. And that was something the council would talk about too, kind of going, why are we thanking these people? You know, 1% is not going to help me. So it was something that made an impact. You know, we not only listen to our member organizations and the families out there in terms of what our advocacy should look like, but council representing their local people, the people all over the province, and even themselves were such a great influence on us. So that's my speech in terms of what I think self-advocacy is all about. And I would even go further to say Community Living Ontario would not have gotten that feedback necessarily from one particular person. You know, if somebody came into our office and said that, we might listen, but because it's a group of people advocating for themselves, not in a segregated way, but in a collective way, it becomes a force. And our goal is to, while working with others in the community, try to do that throughout the province and build on that. Number 3, still on the same page, but below. We expanded council's advocacy presence when Community Living Ontario board members and staff met with government or spoke with media. So this is, you know, something council always did, but not to the same length. I think that we were involved in some of the discussion with government, but we upped our game. So we made a strategic choice 6 or 7 years ago to include self-advocates from the board and self-advocates on our council in major advocacy issues like poverty, like I just described. This included a presence at events like Day at the Legislature, or when we met with the minister, participation in government consultations, like we did with the young man a number of years ago who unfortunately passed away in service when he fell down a well living in poor services or a filthy environment, in inquiries, and in pre-budget consultations, like I said. And we see that this can be really effective. And by the way, that picture there is a meeting that we had with the Minister of Community Social Services, Minister Jasek. That's the woman in the middle, and that's James Taylor standing beside her, and Chris is on the other side. And I think they put me away at the back there. You can see me.
Yeah, you can just make out your head in the back.
That's terrible. Anyway, so on that day, I don't know if James is on the call today or not, but on that day, James was this a few years back, James was the president, Nico's position now. James was the president. We had him come in, and you can see some of our board members and some of our staff there. I was included in that meeting, and the minister and a couple of her people were there as well. And we went around the table and talked about the separate issues that were important to us. I probably had said something related to the membership part of the presentation, but it was James's turn to speak to the minister, and his point, again, on point, was the issue of poverty. And we had worked with his support person, Vicky, from Community in London, in terms of what he wanted to talk about. And one of the things he had talked about, or he came up with, was a story, a real story of one of his friends. Now, James is quite fortunate, without talking too much about James. He didn't put himself in this position, but his friend wasn't doing so well financially. And James told the story of every month he has to make a decision. And I forget the two examples, but I think it was something like, was it a bus pass so he could get to his work, or was it a pair of shoes that he needed because it was winter and his shoes were falling apart? And he said that shouldn't be. And he said it in such a nice way. If people who know James, he's such a polite gentleman that he delivered his line. It was perfect. And this was sitting around the board table, and he said, that shouldn't be, you know, my friend shouldn't have to kind of go through that. ODSP should be sufficient enough that he should be able to afford his bus pass, and if his shoes are falling apart after 5 years, he should be able to pay for his shoes. And I remember the minister, who actually I thought was a very delightful person herself, and I think did a pretty good job. And I'm not trying to be political. I think her personally did a good job. She came back with something terrible. She basically said, well, we have to balance the budget. And I don't remember her looking James in the eye. And I just remember thinking, what an impact. You know, that's okay to tell me that, somebody that's getting paid as a service provider, or, you know, but somebody that comes on their own free time and says that and gets that kind of response. So I don't think she felt that great about it. But it showed me the impact that self-advocacy can have on people, on government. And the good thing, though, was that, I don't know, like a few months later, a year later, we were in London for a consult with the government. The public were there, council and members of the advocacy group at London were sitting around the table. And she noticed James, and she noticed a few of the other self-advocates. When the minister came in, she was sort of flooded by people, kind of like a big celebrity that comes in the room. But she was surrounded by people. But she looked across the room, she saw her group, and she came over and she sat at the table and started talking about the issues of poverty again, which she raised. So it obviously made some kind of impact. Like I said, I think she was a decent person that tried to do right. But she picked up on the fact that this was a group that she respected and wanted to hear from. So and identified. And what more can you ask for? So almost on my part. Number 4. To flip the page. In making these changes, Council received complete support and encouragement from the CLO board, our CEO, senior management, and our membership. It was a real feeling of coming together, greater familiarity. You know, to this day, our board is still great, and I think Council feels at ease in terms of calling the board if they do. I know Nico and our board president, Jill, talk and email back and forth. And you know, the other great thing that Jill does and Chris does is after council does something, like send a letter of support or a letter of concern, and we share that, we always get a thank you from Jill and Chris, and keep up the great work and encouragement. You know, it's something that I think both groups, the board and the council, thrive on. Number 5. Meg's going to talk more about this. Council continued to receive the support of a dedicated staff person who reports directly to management. So Meg's going to talk what that looks like. I just want at this point say, I know that we're talking to an audience. There's some of them smaller organizations in Community in Ontario, or smaller organizations in some of the big ones I've described. But if you can't afford like a part-time worker or a casual worker to do this kind of work, figure it out within your organization, develop a plan, and identify key responsibilities that people have. Just don't let it go off to the side. Or, you know, if Tom's busy this week, well, maybe Jill can step in and do it. That type of thing doesn't work because people don't have that. People need that responsibility. People need to make that a priority as opposed to something they'll get to. And we've seen that happen, and we've seen that by some of the feedback we get from people calling in and speaking to us, or we've seen it in terms of, well, the self-advocacy group is sort of falling down. Self-advocacy group get together still, but they don't really do as much as people would want them to. Make it a priority, and whatever system you develop, whether it can be a paid staff or an unpaid staff or a volunteer, put a plan together, make sure it's tied in with the organization, the executive director, senior staff, and that you tie the two groups together in terms of your board and your self-advocacy body.
I wanted to quickly touch on that one, and it's a very key thing with what you're saying is that with that having that dedicated person or support, like with our local chapter with the Durham North, is that we've even been approached for groups that are wanting to try and get advocacy groups put together, and it's great when they want to get feedback from us on how ours is structured, and then they can figure out how can we go about getting our own going, or if they have one, how they can maybe improve on it. So having that feedback is so crucial.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. So finally, to end my section, Community Living Ontario continues to benefit from a stronger relationship with Council, and in turn, Council feels better appreciated and more confident. Council has truly made Community Living Ontario a stronger organization. So I'm going to send it over to Meg, who's been patiently sitting quietly.
Listening.
Listening.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
So some of this might have been said already, but just to reiterate, to talk a little bit about my position as the engagement coordinator. So it is a part-time position that's dedicated solely to supporting Council. And like Keith had just said, if there isn't the ability, whether it be a budget thing, that you can't dedicate one staff or a person to supporting the Council, you can create it into a full-time position. We just think it is important to have that one staff be that go-to person just to make sure that the self-advocacy council is successful. So it's going to look different depending on what your agency looks like, which I think is what Keith had just said. But that staff or myself would support Council. Nico's getting chilly. He's putting on a sweater.
That's what I get for not having my heat on in the living room.
Okay. I support Council in a lot of different ways. One of them would be letter writing. So like Keith had mentioned before, Council has written letters of encouragement to the boards. We write letters to different government bodies. Recently, we've written letters about our advocacy against the development of large institution-like settings. That's a big focus. Also to Participation House. Nico, you're good at explaining kind of the reasons why we wrote to Participation House.
So
go ahead. Yeah.
So the reason why we reached out, well, they were struggling because of, as we all know, this has been a major pain with the pandemic, and they had some deaths that happened, or was it just they were looking for some
there were some, yeah, there were some lives lost at Participation House, which is a large residential home in Markham.
So like we as council members heard about this and wanted to just trying to send them some encouraging thoughts and to say that we're here to support you and don't be afraid to reach out. And like that's why we had Meg and one of our members actually help draft a letter in support, just to say that, hey, we're thinking about you, you're not alone. And it's a good way for us to reach out and engage with the communities.
Yeah, yeah. And we have a member of council who's excellent at writing letters. She has a talent in writing letters, if you will. And she wrote a beautiful letter that was put together for that. Just we didn't, or council specifically didn't want anybody to think that those lives would be forgotten. I also help in writing speeches for different events. Recently, council participated in an event that was hosted by New Vision Advocates in London for the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Council put together a presentation that highlighted what it was like to be a person with a disability living in their city, which was a great event. Also, a couple years ago, council members participated in an event that celebrated the closure of institutions in Canada. So I helped write speeches. Council put together a couple of speeches that just highlighted the empathy for survivors or people.
And that was actually early last year in Toronto,
Yeah,
and I remember because I attended that, and that was huge.
So I attended the event, supported council, helped them write speeches, that kind of thing. It's a supportive role. And we also do presentations at the Speaking Out conference as well. Every other year when it's in person, council has a presentation there, which is great. So I would help. I attend the conference, I support council during the presentation, that kind of thing. I also run the election, the council election. So once a year, council's elections are held at our annual, not the annual general meeting, the conference in September. So I would send the call for nominations out in the spring and run the election in the fall, that kind of thing. Administrative functions like putting together agendas with Nico. So depending on who the president is at that time, what their strengths are, how they need me to support them, I would do that. So taking minutes, we do have a secretary on council, and however they need me to help support in regards to taking the minutes, typing the minutes, whatever it might be. When we did meet in person, hopefully we can do that again soon, I would book hotels, book meals, travel arrangements, that kind of thing. So Keith had already mentioned, I know I'm looking at the time too, yeah, about a half an hour. Keith had mentioned too about the priority topics, touched on ODSP and poverty, also touched on one of the priority topics being advocacy against the large institution-like settings. There's 7 in total. I can just touch on them briefly. Living in unsafe or in unaffordable housing. Keith had kind of talked about how they met with the minister, different government bodies to talk about that. The mistreatment of people in their homes, and Keith had touched on the gentleman that had passed away that lived in the group home. They also wanted to focus a little bit on healthcare and the access to quality healthcare. And the assisted dying and euthanasia. That one, I don't know, Nico, if you wanted to touch a little bit more on Bill C7.
So, and this has been a very hot topic for a lot of people, with the medical assistance and dying. We've had a lot of people that are like using that as a way of like saying like, oh, I'm so fed up, and like they just want to end it. But like we want to encourage people to like, they're not alone, and that if they need support, it's there. We don't want to see like governments trying to say, oh, well, this person isn't capable and they just need to end. It's like, I'm sorry, but you know what, like, and I don't want to go political, like Keith has said earlier, is that like, you know what, we want to be the voice that is like making sure that like people are being respected. And with the medical assistance and dying, it should only be used when it's absolutely needed. It shouldn't just be an escape route for saying, oh, well, like, no, it's honestly like, and I read stories of this all the time, and it infuriates me. And it's like, I hate how it has to like play a role in that, but we want to be used only as a very last resort.
And council's been very active recently in, there was something that was put together by CLO that encouraged council members to meet with their MPs to talk about their stance against Bill C7. So that was something that was most recently about a priority topic there. Lastly, the council has a terms of reference that they've put together, and it's a set of guidelines that gives council focus and structure. Council as a group, with my support, put together these terms of reference. They were confirmed by all members, and if anybody wants to change or edit these terms of reference, it does need to be discussed and confirmed by all members again. So it's not something that is kind of a fluid thing. It is something that gives the focus and structure to council. So that was recently put together as well. Also, like Keith had talked about before me, fostering connections between the board of directors. So when we do get together in person, which seems like so long ago now, I can't remember the last time I've seen any of you in person, we would make sure that there would be that social connection, but there would also be that meeting together to kind of share similar concerns and support each other's advocacy efforts, for sure. So there's that big connection between the board of directors and council that's been fostered over the last couple of years. And then just fostering connections between council and other self-advocacy groups in the province. So doing webinars like today, reaching out to, like Keith had said, like People First, other self-advocacy groups, that kind of thing. So it's been a good couple of years, and I've really enjoyed working with everybody I got a chance to work with. And the next slide, we did put together some recommendations for our members. So these we put together for the people who are watching as a takeaway. So these are going to be the main points that we feel that we would like you guys to take away from today's webinar. And I think, Nico, you're going to go ahead and go over some of these points with everybody.
Yes. Great. So the recommendation, don't know what happened. We just lost slides.
Marwa will bring it back up.
All the pressure's on Marwa.
Yeah, poor Marwa.
Dun, dun, dun.
Sorry, just give me one.
Today has not been a good day for technical difficulties for anybody. There you go.
There we go. So recommendations to our members include members of your self-advocate group as much as you can in the activities and decision-making processes of your organization. Focus on engagement. Recognize that different viewpoints are necessary in building a creative and dynamic organization. Create. If a dedicated support staff is not possible, as Meg said, then create a dedicated plan of action that identifies clear responsibilities. Invite self-advocates to speak at your board meetings, AGMs, and when meeting your MPPs. Meet with your board and senior staff. Meet with your self-advocacy groups on a regular basis. Encourage. Be aware of the work your self-advocacy group is doing and provide your support and encouragement when needed.
Thanks, Nico.
So we have a couple of questions that we put together to ask Nico, just so it gives people watching today a little bit more of an idea about kind of Nico's perspective of what it's like to be a council member, specifically president this year. So Nico, do you want to share with us, do you feel that council is effective?
I do, and the reason why I say that it is because like we attend as many functions as we can and events just to spread the word that we are there for people who need it and the support to solve issues and also to listen to people. Like we want to be like we can only be effective if we're being listened to and if we attend functions to get our voice and message out there.
Perfect. And do you feel that council is respected by Community Living Ontario or specifically people who support you directly, Keith and myself?
So I look at it as it's a two-way street. Like when we work together collaboratively with the board and other groups, then yes, we are being respected. But if we're not being respected, then we need to be able to identify what needs to be improved on or fixed in order to gain that respect. Because just like everybody knows, respect is a two-way street. You have to give in order to get.
Perfect. Do you feel listened to?
And again, like depending on what issues are going on, like we've sometimes put our voices out and we're not being heard. And you know what, like it's important that we are heard because, like I've said before, if we don't have a voice, we can't help others, and we can't be there to represent those that are struggling.
Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship as president with other council members?
So my relationship with the council as president is that and this is going to tie into probably I think your next question, is that like
Yeah.
you always have to be professional in your capacity as that role. I mean, we do our phone meetings, and yes, we can joke around, but we also have to maintain that focus and seriousness on the issues that are very important. But we also have members that have a very strong ability, like they have good abilities at doing things. Like we have Nicole, who's one of our members of council, who's very good with the letter writing. She's very passionate about issues. She's very vocal, and you know what? That's important. Same with Yvonne and Teresa that have been on our council, and Yvonne being our council appointee. The two of them are very vocal on issues, and they are very key components to the team. Because you know what, being vocal is only one aspect of it, but having that action plan of what needs to be done is also a huge component too.
So knowing
And
the strengths of each member, kind of.
yeah, and just like Meg said, like with her job as an engagement coordinator, or as I like to say, liaison, she's very good at working with the people that are having struggles and make sure that they're able to still do the role that they're put in to do.
That everybody's successful, right?
Exactly. So like we band together, and as a team, we can accomplish anything we put our minds to. And we always listen to the issues that are being brought forward by people. We recognize that, and we figure out, okay, how can we go about fixing this or making it better? And for me as a president, I make sure that when we have our meetings, that they are run smoothly. We keep track of the time. We always let people have their opinions, and if people don't agree with it, you know what? That's okay. Like people are entitled to their opinions. And we also, I also consult on every aspect of like with the agenda preparation, letters that are being put forth, just making sure that everything is running smoothly.
What about the importance of support and encouragement within council?
So, and I'm gonna actually just read this off from my notes because it speaks better than me trying to run off of my head.
It's well written, Nico.
So without the support of our organization and the people who work with us, we wouldn't have the Council of Self-Advocates or the engagement coordinator or Keith being an active players in this. And we wouldn't be able to be the voice of others. We always want to encourage others to stand up for what they believe in and not let others push us around, as we want to help as many people as we can in the various issues that we face, such as poverty, ODSP, housing, like better living environments, ensuring that we're stable and treated as equals, and have the right amount of funding to help us get by and not always struggle month to month. Having better access to the things we need. Transit, like that is a key component, because without like transit, you can't get anywhere. And having people that are very passionate about that sort of thing, and making sure that there's access for all is important. Like we may have a disability, but that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with us. We're human like everyone else, and we don't deserve to be judged. Equality is key for all. And I can't stress this point enough. Communication is very key. Like honestly, without communication, everything will fall apart, and you won't have any structure. And like for me, I work as a crossing guard, so I take that job seriously for 2 points. A, the safety of the individuals and kids that I cross. And B, I look at it as a reminder that for traffic is that we have an important role to do, but it also is a two-way street. The traffic people that are driving need to be aware that, hey, we're there to like make sure people are staying safe. Do your part and be respectful to us. If you're not showing us respect, it's not going to go the same way. And honestly, like I've enjoyed being part of council. It's great that we have the voice and that we listen to the issues that are going on, and that we can put together a plan that will help reduce those issues.
Perfect.
Thanks, Nick. Nico.
Thanks, Nico. And we'll just go to our last slide before we open up.
I want to say thank you to everyone that has been a part of this, and for those that are watching and listening. Our contact info is there. We'll leave that up, especially during question periods. Meg has been a key player in this, Keith as well. We are all approachable at any time. Reach out to us if something doesn't get answered today. Send us an email. We will get back to you and provide whatever answer we can. We're here to listen. We're here to help.
Yeah, and if anyone's interested in seeing any documents like the council's terms of reference or the list of priority topics, you can feel free to reach out to us and we will share those for sure.
And for those that tuned in late, this webinar has been recorded and it will be available, and it will be put out as well as on our resources page of the Community Living Ontario website.
Perfect.
Which has an awesome library of other webinars that people might have missed or very good topics. It's a great page to put out there.
Great. Thanks, Nico. So we do have a couple of questions from the audience. The first question, how important is financial support from your agency? It's a good question.
It is a good question.
I think meaning specifically possibly to create a position like my own, or I don't know if you want to touch on whatever you think there. Or if whoever asked the question wants to specify if what I'm saying is correct, or if there was something specifically.
Okay. Do we have the name of the person? Doesn't have to. We don't have to. I'm just getting curious.
Yeah.
I think at Community Living Ontario, it's essential because we have expenses that go beyond what a local association would. So, you know, we were talking about the meetings that we have. And when everything comes back to normal, we meet at least 4 or maybe 5 times a year. So that means people coming from Thunder Bay and Ottawa and Windsor and London. There's expenses related to that. We meet up at a hotel, and so it's quite a bit of money in that way. It's all the money, so that's where most of the budget goes. We also have money to pay for myself and Meg. That usually comes through different ways. We carve off, without getting into the specifics of how we carve that off, we have a variety of, we will fundraise, we'll have monies dedicated to. We've also had given to us over the years that we've carved off. But again, if you're not in that position, try to figure it out in terms of structuring your staff and your volunteers to do it in a way that's accountable. The other thing I see going on, I guess, around the province is any fundraising activities. I think it's a perfect fit for fundraising activities, actually. We tend to kind of zero in on other things that we need, like, an accessible transit vehicle, that type of thing. Of course, those things are important, but it's also, I think, something that you can promote in terms of self-advocacy groups within your town as well, that people could donate to or use those dollars for those purposes.
Mhm.
Just an idea.
Perfect. Yeah, they did specify that they meant for the self-advocacy group, so I think that answered it well.
Yeah, I'm just reading through the list too. So
Yeah, I can go on to the next question. Where do you see self-advocacy in 10 years? It's a good
ooh,
question.
very good question. I mean, I'll answer part of that as that, like, we obviously want to still help be a voice for people, and that's not going to change because we know that there's going to be issues that are going to stem even from our main focus points that we brought up of issues that are stemming. And you know what? We want to make sure that those self-advocacy groups hopefully will continue to run and still be a key component in the organization structure. I don't
And
know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Keith or
I
Meg?
would say even more and more involvement of self-advocates within the agency, within the organizations, committees, and anyway, like we spoke about today, just even more so.
And I would like to see it build, I don't know if it'll happen or not, but I'd like to see it build to a greater interconnectedness. You know, we've touched on that. I think we've started like, for instance, things like the Speaking Out Conference, etc. But it would be nice to have people connecting. I think it's odd in that I think a lot of people would see, you know, for instance, a conference with self-advocates. Well, is that segregation? It's not segregation again if it's involved, and the whole thinking behind it is focused in on outreach to people. I think it's if you look at it as a source of empowerment, empowering each other. It's the way you do it, not what you do, as far as I'm concerned. So that's what I'd like to see.
Next question, has council been meeting virtually since the pandemic?
And strong yes on that. We've been using Zoom for our meetings, and it's obviously it's different for people not being able to be getting together as we usually do, but a lot of people have been adapting well to using it, and a lot of other organizations have been using it for their meetings, and it's great because then we can at least still see everybody. Yeah, it's not the same that we're not in the same room like we would be, but at least it's there as a resource and tool for us to use. And
so we've been meeting once a month. So
yeah.
Which is what we would meet once a month by telephone before the pandemic, and then like Keith had said, about 3 or 4 times a year in person. Other than that, so we've still been meeting once a month. Now it's just over Zoom, and we haven't had those in-person meetings, but definitely.
Which we hope will happen again once this gains some better normalcy. Haha.
So Nico, there's something here for you. It says, Nico, you mentioned a few times how important it is for advocates to be respected. What does it look like when a developmental service organization is respecting advocates and people who use services? Is there anything you would add beyond what you have shared today?
Very good question. As someone who's part of an organization that deals with some developmental service, like just being there to listen to the people you support, working together with them. Like if there's something that it's so hard to answer that question. It's such a good one. But honestly, like, geez, like,
No
I don't know if there is anything more aside from just being able to listen and work together. Because a lot of times now is that organizations are using the people-centered approach for doing their structure and how they can support the individuals. Because before it was always just the staff putting down what they figured was necessary. But they changed that because of the whole accreditation thing, and that they wanted it to be more person-centered. So engaging more with the clients that they support so they can provide the support they need in order to help them with their lives.
Great.
And to that person that did ask that question, please shoot me an email, because I'd like to actually have more discussion about that, and maybe there's something that I can't think of now that could be tied into that, but please reach out to me by email, and I'd be happy to have a further discussion on that.
Perfect. Another question here says, can you talk about the types of education or workshops that you provide or coordinate to support people in learning about how to advocate well? So I would say that the workshop that we're doing in January, and that's going to be directed more towards self-advocates.
And with it being in plain language, it'll be in a more easier format for people to understand.
Yeah, so there's that one. I don't know if there's anything else, Nico or Keith, you can think of to add.
I mean, like, I do see other workshops that happen periodically that pop up, and it varies on the topic, but a lot of it can be geared to well, for some of it can be geared for self-advocates, some not. But honestly, the more you learn, the better you know.
I was going to say the sessions we do at conference, and as well the speaking out conference as well. We're
Speaking out conference, yeah, and those both happen in the fall. So the CLO conference is in September, and the speaking out conference is usually in October. And every other year it's in person, and then they would do, I think they do like a retreat the opposite year, right? So both of those I think would be good resources in regards to more education. And just scrolling down.
Not,
is there one other one?
No, this isn't from the audience. Maybe what is a good first step? What is a good first step for an organization to start incorporating self-advocacy into their work if they don't do it currently?
It's a good one.
That's
a good first step.
I would say don't wait for self-advocates to come to you, but you go, you know, I mean, you being, you know, senior management or someone on the board, you go to them, ask if they'd like to chat, right? And I think that, you know, historically, even the most well-spoken person who sees himself as a self-advocate, you know, has felt rejection over his lifetime or her lifetime. And I think just the idea of saying, I'd like to talk, why don't you come on in one day? Or maybe I could visit you at your home. Or maybe if you're having a meeting, I'd just like to come and see what it's more of it's about. I think that sends a huge message of welcoming and of acceptance of and encouraging someone that you're part of this organization and that you're just not, you know, I think a lot of self-advocates feel like, what do we have to do to get attention? Right?
And it's kind of like what I spoke to earlier, is that, like, for part of our A team, our local chapter for the Durham North, is that we've had organizations and groups that have reached out to us, and they're trying to figure out how can we get our self-advocacy group going, even if they only have like a couple people or they don't have anybody and they want to know more. Like, we provide our kind of training stuff that we do, and we discuss like what our functions are and how we got ourselves going, and then we kind of use that as a stepping stone for them to figure out where they can take that.
I would also say the second part of that would be, and it's more like advice, would be don't be afraid of people having different opinions or different thoughts of how things should be. You know? If you do it honestly and collaboratively, you kind of work it out. And I think people sometimes will go, oh, I don't want to go there because I don't think we're ready to meet with someone. We haven't figured that out. We haven't quite figured that out. Just give you an example of kind of like, well, people have the right to live wherever they want, right, within your organization. We haven't perfected that yet. That's a tough one. We don't want to meet with a group of people that will be critical of us. Well, you know what? That is a tough thing to figure out. And be open to a bit of criticism. You know, I'm just using an example, like at a meeting. Well, you shouldn't be doing that. Well, at least to put you in this position of kind of trying to, defending why you haven't done that yet, or why there's been an exception to the rule or whatever. That's a healthy discussion. It's a healthy discussion, right? You're not a perfect organization, and I think if you go into that conversation respectfully, you might have a bit of a hard time with it, but at the same time, it's a bit of pressure on you for next time. Let's not forget people are really concerned with this. It's just an example where you can have conflicting opinions within an organization. I think it just makes you a better organization. I don't know why I thought of that example, but the example I used earlier around the poverty ODSP issue with Community Living Ontario, everybody kind of went, yeah, you're right. We were kind of making a convenient way for ourselves, and we need to kind of figure that out. And I think we became a better agency, or we put a better position forward as a result.
And we have one last question before we wrap up for today. How do you recruit members to council? Sorry, go ahead, Nico. You want to?
So what Meg does in the spring is that she'll put out a notice that, like, for our upcoming elections that are happening in the fall, and we try to encourage people that if they are passionate about wanting to be a voice for people, and if they think they'd be a good fit, that they will we will actually have them submit their little bit of info about themselves, and just basically ask them how can you be a key player in it, like what do you want to see done, and then that person will then run at the election with their speech and why they think they should be on the council. Like for me, I find it's more of like trying to get as much people active as they can, but like everybody's skill sets are different and what they can bring forward. But we always are encouraging anyone that's a self-advocate within their organization or a member of their organization is if they want to be part of council, put yourself forward. We're not likely to turn anybody away because having that voice is important.
We're fortunate that we have the whole province to select people from, but that question has come up to Meg and myself when we've spoken to local organizers of self-advocacy, and one of the things they say is we kind of get the same people all the time, and that can be a bit of a problem. So I think like any group, there's sort of an established peer group that you need to be kind of aware of, that you need to make new people feel comfortable. I always look at somebody that's on council and they just got elected and they have to face, respected advocates like Nico that has been around for years and knows what he's doing, et cetera, et cetera. And here's this poor person from Sault Ste. Marie that comes on a plane and gets to our meeting. You need to encourage that they're welcomed and that they're respected. And I think our council does a pretty good job with that. We've got some pretty strong characters, but that whole part of it, you want to make sure that establishment isn't turning people away. You want to make sure those established people are welcoming people. So that might be something, your volunteer or your staff person would be assisting with. To making sure.
And I just wanted to point out too, further to what Nico said, the call for nominations goes out in the spring, and then nominees would give a speech at the election in September, and they are voted in. So it's voted strictly by other self-advocates. So any self-advocate across the province from a member organization can register to vote. So they are voted in council members.
And I'm going to say on behalf of our team that's been presenting today, we want to say a huge thank you to Marwa for being a key component in this webinar. And it's, actually, we've got another question that popped up, or a comment.
Not a question, just a thank you.
From someone at Christian Horizons, not a question. Just a thank you from Cynthia Jeffrey from Christian Horizons. This was very informative. You're quite welcome. And we're glad that for those who are able to join and listen in and watch, we appreciate all of your support. Thank you to Keithy and Meg for helping put this webinar together.
Thank you, Nico.
And we hope that you take something away from this. And again, our contact info is there. Marwa will send it out again in the chat for you guys because we can't see your chat. But reach out to us if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or things you might want to have brought up for the next webinar, because we can always use the feedback from today to help us with the structure for the one in January. And again, that was January 12th.
Yeah, January 12th. We'll send out more information, or it will be on the website as well. I'll send it out on our self-advocacy email list as well.
All right.
So again, thank you for joining us today. Hope everyone stays safe. And we will see you all again soon.
Thanks, everybody. All right. Bye now.
Have a good one, everybody.